if you work with vendors or suppliers and you want to keep track of all of the projects that they're associated with and the amount that you've spent with them so you can negotiate better terms with them, this video is for you. I'm going to walk you through everything inside of Monday.com. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of my example Monday.com system. Now, when vendors and suppliers are getting involved with your business, when you are buying things from people, it's important to track that information. Namely, you can track cost and also the total spend against that or with that supplier or vendor, so you can negotiate terms with them. And we've seen this time and time again. Businesses end up spending a fortune with their suppliers or vendors, don't realize, and then do realize after we help them set this sort of thing up. And then they go, oh, hang on, we spent so much money with them. Why can't we get better terms with them? Why can't we do a deal with them? Why can't we work something out? So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to do that. First and foremost, we need to go ahead and press the plus button, create a new board. This is just a standard board inside of Monday.com. This applies to work management or sales CRM. And then we're going to go ahead and call this vendors/suppliers. There we go. So this is going to be a list of all our vendors or suppliers. Privacy options, either main, accessible to everyone, private, only you and select individuals, or shareable. So if you want to share this board externally, you're more than welcome to. I'm just going to leave it as main. And then the naming convention here, I'm going to call this vendors/ I'll just call it vendors actually, to prevent any confusion within Monday.com. So first and foremost, it's just a board to track all of our vendors. Now that's the easy stuff, right? So we might have active vendors, and then we might have inactive vendors. So if this is people you used to work with, and then people you obviously actively are working with, inactive, and then we will add another label, which would be active, just to start with. So we've got our two groups there, and then we've got our status options to reflect the status, or at least the grouping, like whether they are, in fact, active or inactive. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to change the colors to red, and then that to green. And then the next thing we'll do is just set up the basic automation. So when status changes to active, move item to group active. When status changes to inactive, move item to group inactive. It's a shame AI is not available to do this. So we are having to do this manually ourselves, but we only have to do it once. So it is not the end of the world. Cool. So then the next thing that we're probably going to look at is the date created. So on what day was this vendor or supplier added to your system? So we've got date created. We probably won't necessarily need, let's say, date inactive. So all we would do is just create an automation that says not status. When an item is created, we set the date as being date created to today. So we know when that vendor or supplier was added into your system. This is just basic housekeeping stuff. Cool. So then what we'd probably look at is things like, let's take a status option, and we would have, let's go with vendor type. So as an example, they might sell a range of different things. In fact, that's a very good point. What I would probably use instead is a drop down menu. We'll come back to our status option in a short while. But let's just delete that for the time being. So we'll have vendor type. Now, vendor type could be a number of different things. So let's just imagine we're working with a construction company, or we're in construction setting. Just for example's sake, they might sell concrete, bricks. I don't know. Concrete. They might sell this particular thing, this particular resource. So this is where you can, let's just imagine that there's bricks, crete. I don't know. Forgive my lack of maybe understanding, right? So vendor type or vendor resources, shall we say, is probably a better one. So these are all the things that this particular vendor sells. So we can then filter and say, show me all of our active vendors that sell bricks, for example. So we've got that as an option here. So vendor resource. Now we might have like an example that we see for larger organizations is security level. So what security level does this particular vendor have access to within inside of the organization, or something along those lines, right? So you can go ahead and we can set and say they are, let's say, level 3 or level 2 or level 1. So level 2 and then, I don't know, level 1. Level, come on, man. level 1, just as an example. So you've got a few different data points that you can track here. Again, we've got, let's say, the vendor resources, their security level, so they're a level 1. Let's just reposition that, otherwise it's going to annoy me. Level 1, 2, or 3. And then you can have other data points as well associated with that particular vendor. So you could see, I don't know, you can just have vendor description. You can have tax information relating to that vendor, like invoicing details, billing details, stuff like that. These are just obviously like a long text column. So we could have vendor description as an example. And then we could also have, let's say, I don't know, let's click in. We could have vendor files. So a file's gone on. I know we had one. So vendor files, just hypothetically. And then let's see what else. Checkbox, we've got formula columns, which probably come on to. We can have a person that's associated with this. Let's just see if there's anything else that I think might be relevant at this stage for managing our vendors. We might have a location, so vendor location, especially if you obviously based in the US and you work with different vendors depending on where you are based or where the project is based that you're working on, for example. And then let's see what else. Tags, rating, creation log. I don't think so. I don't think there's a great deal more to add that's blatantly obvious. I mean, you might have, if you wanted to, you might have like a vendor email address. What you could do is have a contacts board, and then the contacts board will be connected with the vendor, and then you'd have multiple contacts associated with that particular vendor. If you wanted to keep it simple, you could just have a vendor phone, a vendor email. Let's go vendor phone. And then a vendor POC, which would just be a text column. So as an example, vendor POC name. And then if you wanted to, you just have, let's say, Nick Boardman. We'd have Nick at crmcrew.com. We would have their phone number 0771 111 1111. And then vendor location, let's just say London, as an example. And then vendor files, not got anything. Very important vendor, naturally, right? And then we've got their security level. Let's say they're a level 3, and we are obviously active. And then we will delete these. And then we will also have the name of the vendor, which is CRM Crew Limited. Cool. So that's what a vendor would look like, right? So this is just a basic board to manage your vendors. You can go ahead and add a map view if you wanted to. So if we go maps or map singular, and then the map can show based on the location that we've entered in for all of our vendors, and we can see all around. This is the UK, obviously. If you're based over in the United States, you would be able to see that. Oh, that's a bit weird. But you would obviously be able to see your different vendors across the country. So that's quite helpful. Again, this is really basic stuff. Now, the more exciting thing is when we are managing spend associated with our vendors, which I think is more important, right? How much money have we spent with all of our vendors? You can obviously add these basic data points and what you want to track with your vendors. But let's go ahead and create a new board. Now, this is going to be a purchase orders board. Every single purchase order is going to be associated with a vendor. Now, I have covered purchase order management in another video on this channel, so you can go ahead and watch that if you want to know how to build out purchase orders. But obviously we want to associate our purchase orders with our vendors, so I'm going to run through a basic PO setup and then how it would connect to our vendors and then the total spend against all of our vendors. So board name, purchase orders, we've got privacy options, same apply, I'll leave it as main, and then our custom terminology is going to be purchase orders, as you can see, and then just press create board. So the key things that we're going to really want to capture on the purchase order board, and I'm going to keep this really, really simple, is ultimately just the, so let's go new purchase orders, and then we'd have, let's say, completed purchase orders. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be for purchase orders. It could be just for projects, and then you would associate all of your vendors / suppliers with a particular project. The reason I like doing the purchase order stuff is then we can assign a specific value for a specific vendor or supplier, and then you can get the totals. If you're doing it for projects, it would be more difficult to track. The way I would do it for projects is I would have project costs, so it'd be a separate board. So I'd have my projects board, project costs associated with my project, and then those costs would be associated with the supplier, and then I could track the cost per supplier, and then also, yeah, it's like line items. That's how I would do it, but I wouldn't have a direct connection between vendor suppliers or yeah, I wouldn't, if I was doing it through projects, I wouldn't have a direct connection between vendors / suppliers to projects. It'd be vendors / suppliers to another board, which is project costs. The project cost would be associated with the project. That will give you total roundup of the cost. You could even break it down by project cost types. And then also it feeds back to the vendor / supplier, but you get line item cost per vendor / supplier. Appreciate that's probably quite complicated, but that's how I would do it. So new purchase orders, completed purchase orders. Again, you would just have your different status options. So we'd have new, and then we'd have completed. So imagine I log a cost associated or a purchase order request, and then I want to see all of the purchase orders associated with each of my suppliers / vendors. What I can then do, and just all I need to really do here, is add 2 columns, which is a numbers column, and that's PO value. PO value. So again, if you're doing project, it would be project cost value. And then I don't know what's happened there. Very odd, Monday.com. So then I would say let's 40,000 for this particular purchase order. We'll go settings, customize, dollar, hide, column, and then restrict column editing. And then date created, I'm just going to get rid of all of this basic stuff. And then the file thing can go as well. Cool. So then I've got a PO value, and then whatever other information I needed to track. What I can do is I can create a connection column between my purchase orders and my vendors / suppliers, as you can see here. And it's important we create a 2-way connection. Press connect boards. So we could then say singular, just vendor. And then I can connect a purchase order submission to my vendor. And as you can see here, there's a 2-way connection. So I can see all of the purchase orders associated with this particular vendor or supplier, whatever terminology you want to use, which is very helpful. But more importantly, I can then go ahead and I can add a column to the right and add a mirror column, and I can mirror over all of the cost, the total cost. So total cost or total spend with this particular vendor. So I can see that we've had one purchase order and we spent $40,000 with this vendor. Now, if I go ahead and add another purchase order, let's say 100,000, 150, and then I can go ahead and connect this to my vendor as well. So same vendor, CRM Crew Limited. I can then see here that our total spend with this particular vendor is 190,000. So then I could go ahead and bring this across. Now, obviously, that's quite a lot of money. Other stuff we can then look to do, now we've got our spend available to us, is we could go ahead and we can do some conditional coloring. So we could say where sell is equal to total spend equals or greater than, for example, 100,000. Press save in new view. Then, what have we done there? Main table. What's happened? My conditional coloring is gone. Where has it gone? I don't know what's happened, but we could say essentially if the spend is higher than X amount, then it would flag in our system or it change color or something along those lines. Additionally, we can create new views so we can see all of our vendors. So let's say we create a view and it says total spend is equal to or greater than 100,000. So that will show me all of the vendors or suppliers that we're working with where we're spending above 100,000. So that's again useful to track. We can then look at, total spend or average spend per purchase order if you wanted to. So you could look at an average. So you could go ahead and add another mirror column. And then you could go ahead and mirror purchase orders. And then we could look at the PO value and get an average. So we could say average PO value. So this is the average purchase order value, vendor or supplier, is $95,000. Again, that's a lot. These are all data points that you can then begin to start looking at if you wanted to negotiate with your vendors or suppliers. Say, look, we spent 190K with you. On average, our purchase order value is 95,000. Is there anything that we could do here? You can also then begin to track preferential rates and stuff like that within Monday.com. So that is a basic introduction to how I would look at managing vendors or suppliers within Monday. And then tracking the cost associated with those vendors or suppliers, and then ultimately trying to get a better deal or just growing the relationship, managing the relationship accordingly. There's more that you can do with this. Obviously, you can expand on this, but this is just a basic introduction. If you would like us to help you build something like this out, maybe the purchase orders and vendor / suppliers set up, or you wanted to do project costs, projects, and then vendors and suppliers, we're more than happy to do so. In fact, we would love to help. You can check out the link in the description below, book a call with me and we can have a chat. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions or want to know more about how this works, or maybe I've missed something, it's a good chance I probably have, drop a comment below. If it's a good question, I will make a video answering your question. Anyway, thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch this short video, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.